I hate taxes. In fact, I hate everything about taxes. I hate the idea of taxes. I hate paying taxes. I hate even thinking about taxes. I bet you do too. But even still, there's no way you hate taxes as much as the people of Yonaguni. Because if you did, chances are you wouldn't still be alive. The island of Yonaguni is closer to Taiwan than it is to Japan. In fact, it's closer to Taiwan even than it is to its next neighbor over in its island chain, which has meant that throughout history it has had a unique language, expressed a unique culture, and due to its relative remoteness, has sort of been left undisturbed by its neighbors. It still had to pay tribute to the empires, just like everybody, sometimes China, sometimes Japan, but even as a member of the Ryukyu kingdom, they were sort of the masters of their own domain. Sure, they were subsistence-level farmers and fishermen, but they got by. All of that changed when Okinawa was conquered by Japan. When Japan invaded Okinawa, as with all feudal societies of the past, they looked to their new subjects to provide both manpower and supplies. Here on the island of Yonaguni, with barely a few hundred people to begin with, and as far from the mainland as the Japanese tentacle could grasp, that meant supplies. In turn, this island, which was not particularly well cultivated, received a head tax so large that there was no way they could possibly fulfill it. To the elders of the community, this would have been an extreme imposition. Rice and materials would need to be provided in numbers that would effectively starve their entire community to death. There was no way with their population that it was possible they'd be able to meet the demands of their Japanese overlords, and in their desperation they turned to an option that today seems almost unfathomable: democide. For the community to survive, the weakest would have to die. There would be no room for those who were unable to work. There would be no room for those who could not produce more than the tax demanded, and so they set about creating a series of challenges that would help them choose who lived and who died. Two of these challenges are remembered by the people of Yonaguni today, and in a somewhat macabre fashion have been made into spots for Japanese tourists to come and silently reflect on the toll their colonialism imposed on these people. In the center of the island, there was a famous rice paddy. It's almost equidistant from the major population centers and takes roughly the same amount of time to reach from any of the island's furthest pastures. It was there that the leaders of the community set as a destination for a foot race lifted right from the pages of a Stephen King novel. Once a bell was rung, you ran to the paddy. No matter what you were doing, you dropped your work and you ran. The first few hundred people to make it here would be allowed to live. Everyone else would be killed. At least in theory, it was an egalitarian way of deciding who was the most physically fit, who was the most able to work. It wasn't about age or gender or physical size. It was merely a race to the finish. The second way of keeping population down focused, not surprisingly, on pregnant women. As the tax would have been levied against the community based on the total number of citizens, adding new people was a very dangerous affair. So just as with the race to the paddy, they turned it into a test of strength. On the far western corner of the island, near the town of Kubura, there's a chasm in the earth. It isn't particularly deep or spiritually profound location. It wasn't a magical gate to hell or anything interesting like that. It was just a little bit too wide for a weakened pregnant woman to leap across. Which, naturally, is what they made them do. If you got pregnant, you'd be forced to jump across the chasm. And if you made it, you and your baby were safe. If you didn't, they'd bludgeon you to death then and there. Again, a fairly egalitarian way of deciding which women would be strong enough to work through the pregnancy and which in their eyes would produce the most capable children. I feel for the people who had to make that choice almost as much as I do those forced to leap. Because nobody specifically told them they had to kill their own people. They just gave them a number they could never hope to meet. They taxed them to the point that life was simply unsustainable. For their community to survive, the weakest would have to die, and as harsh as it was, they did their best to make it fair. They calculated their losses and acted. I'm certain that nobody on Yonaguni wanted to kill their pregnant women. Nobody wanted to slaughter their slowest relatives and friends. They did it because they had to. And in turn, they survived the worst of the mainland demands. They survived another year of colonization. I often talk about how bad it is to be colonized, but I focus on the things that the colonizers did. I often talk about how bad war is, but I focus on the things the warriors did. But there's more to the horror of conquest than the direct actions of the conquerors. We're all affected by the choices of our leaders. We're all taxed. Often for wars we have no desire to wage. Sometimes we're taxed so much it kills us. The right solution to a problem isn't always right. There are times when we have to sacrifice those that we love, when we have to sacrifice our children and ourselves just to survive as a community. And I think that's something that we've forgotten in our world of plenty, for better and worse. But here on Yonaguni, they remember, even if it's just as a tourist site. This is rare earth. And I honestly don't know if I would make it, pregnant or not.